The boxing world was completely caught off guard the moment Stephen A. Smith stepped into the conversation and delivered a take that didn't just challenge expectations. It disrupted them entirely, instantly dividing fans across the United States and the United Kingdom, because when discussing a potential clash between Jaron Ennis and Xander Zayas, he didn't settle for a balanced breakdown or a cautious prediction, instead making a bold and unexpected claim that Ennis could actually lose, and the way he delivered it, with conviction, intensity, and complete confidence, instantly sent shockwaves through the boxing community, because Ennis isn't just seen as another top contender, he's widely viewed as one of the most dangerous, complete, and forward-moving forces in the sport today, a fighter many believe is destined to dominate his division, which made Smith's statement feel almost controversial on impact, sparking immediate debate, disbelief, and curiosity, as fans and analysts rushed to dissect not only what he said, but why he said it, turning a single opinion into a viral flashpoint that challenged the established narrative and forced the boxing world to reconsider a matchup that many had already mentally decided. What made this moment even more powerful wasn't just the prediction itself, but the unwavering confidence behind it, because when Stephen A. Smith delivered his take, it didn't come across like a casual opinion or a headline-chasing hot take. It felt deliberate, almost like a statement meant to challenge the entire narrative surrounding Jaron Ennis and Xander Zayas, and that's what made it hit so differently, because Smith is known for bold commentary, but this time the tone carried a sense of conviction that suggested deeper reasoning, framing his argument around styles, preparation, and momentum rather than emotion or hype, and that approach is exactly what triggered such a strong reaction from fans and analysts alike, because instead of dismissing it outright, people were forced to engage with it, to question it, to break it down from every angle, turning his words into a spark that ignited widespread debate, where agreement and skepticism collided, and what started as one man's opinion quickly evolved into a larger conversation that challenged assumptions and added even more intrigue to a matchup that was already gaining serious attention. At the center of Stephen A. Smith's argument was one of boxing's oldest and most respected truths, that styles make fights. And that simple idea is exactly what made his prediction feel far more calculated than controversial, because while Jaron Ennis has built his reputation on an impressive blend of versatility, speed, explosiveness, and the ability to adapt mid-fight, Smith suggested that those very strengths are not automatically unbeatable and could be meaningfully tested by the discipline, structure, and continued evolution of Xander Zayas, especially if Zayas continues refining his style under elite guidance, like that of Canelo Alvarez, and successfully adds new layers to his game, because in boxing, dominance often looks unquestionable until the right style appears at the right moment, and Smith's point seemed to center on the possibility that Zayas may be gradually developing into exactly that kind of stylistic complication. Someone capable of disrupting rhythm, staying disciplined under pressure, and forcing Ennis into a more uncomfortable, strategic fight than he may be used to, which instantly made the matchup feel less predictable and far more intriguing, turning what many viewed as a straightforward test into a potentially complex battle where preparation, patience, and execution could matter just as much as natural talent and athletic explosiveness. One of the key factors highlighted by Stephen A. Smith was Xander Zayas' recent decision to train alongside Canelo Alvarez, a move that has already created serious buzz across the boxing world, and not just because of the name involved, but because of what that environment represents at the highest level of the sport, as working with someone of Canelo's caliber doesn't just sharpen technique. It introduces a completely different layer of understanding when it comes to pacing, control, patience, and ring intelligence, the kind of subtle but critical elements that often decide fights at the elite level, and what makes this development even more significant is how directly those qualities could impact a matchup with Jaron Ennis, because while Ennis thrives on versatility and explosive moments, a more composed, disciplined, and strategically aware version of Zayas could potentially disrupt that rhythm, slow the pace, and force the fight into a space where precision and control matter more than raw athleticism, turning what once looked like a straightforward stylistic challenge into something far more layered and dangerous, where even small improvements in timing and decision-making could shift momentum in ways that few initially expected. According to Stephen A. Smith's perspective, the entire equation changes if Xander Zayas is able to genuinely absorb and apply even a portion of the experience gained from working alongside Canelo Alvarez, because at that point he's no longer just a talented rising fighter. He becomes a far more layered, disciplined, and strategically aware opponent capable of presenting problems that aren't immediately obvious, and that's exactly where things become dangerous for someone like Jaron Ennis, because instead of facing a predictable challenge, he could be dealing with a version of Zayas that is constantly adjusting, controlling pace, and forcing exchanges on his own terms. And what makes this idea so compelling is how it flips the narrative entirely, transforming what many initially viewed as a relatively straightforward fight into something far more competitive, calculated, and genuinely unpredictable, where the margin for error shrinks dramatically and every small adjustment could carry significant consequences, ultimately reinforcing Smith's point that in boxing, it doesn't always take a complete transformation to change the outcome. Sometimes even subtle evolution is enough to create a matchup that behaves very differently than expected. At the same time, Stephen A. Smith didn't ignore or downplay the abilities of Jaron Ennis, fully acknowledging that he remains one of the most gifted and dangerous fighters in the sport today. But what made his take so compelling was the way he shifted the focus from what Ennis can do at his best to what might happen if he's forced out of that comfort zone, raising a critical question about how he would respond to an opponent like Xander Zayas, who refuses to engage on predictable terms, someone capable of controlling distance, slowing the pace, and dictating the rhythm in a way that limits explosive opportunities. And that's where the real intrigue begins, because fighters like Ennis thrive when they can impose their style, when they can create chaos, find openings, and adapt on the fly. But if those openings are minimized and the tempo is carefully managed, it creates a different kind of fight. One built on patience, discipline, and decision-making under pressure. And that possibility is exactly what adds tension to the matchup, because it introduces a scenario where Ennis may have to adjust in ways he hasn't consistently been forced to before, turning a fight that once looked straightforward into a strategic battle where control, composure, and adaptability could determine the outcome just as much as natural talent and explosiveness. This line of thinking introduced a narrative that many fans hadn't fully considered, because Jaron Ennis is so often viewed as the clear favorite in most matchups that the conversation usually centers on how he wins rather than whether he can be challenged strategically, and the suggestion that he could be outmaneuvered, not outpowered, but outthought, instantly adds a new layer of intrigue to the potential clash with Xander Zayas, especially when factoring in the influence of Canelo Alvarez on Zayas' development, because it shifts the focus from raw ability to tactical execution, from dominance to decision-making under pressure, and that subtle shift is what makes the matchup feel far more compelling, as it opens the door to scenarios where control of distance, pacing, and discipline could disrupt the rhythm that Ennis typically relies on, forcing him into a more calculated and potentially uncomfortable fight. And in doing so, it transforms the narrative from a predictable outcome into a genuine question mark, where the possibility of a strategic upset becomes just believable enough to capture attention and fuel debate across the boxing world. As clips of Stephen A. Smith's comments began spreading across social media, the reaction was immediate and intense, turning his take into a full-scale debate that pulled in fans, analysts, and fighters alike, with every angle of his argument being dissected in real time, as some supported the idea that Xander Zayas' continued development, especially with the influence of Canelo Alvarez, could elevate him into a legitimate threat capable of creating serious problems, while others pushed back just as strongly, insisting that the natural talent, adaptability, and growing experience of Jaron Ennis would ultimately be too much to overcome. And what made this reaction so compelling was how evenly split it felt, with neither side fully dismissing the other, creating a charged atmosphere where every new clip, breakdown, or opinion added fuel to the conversation, transforming Smith's statement from a single prediction into a larger narrative that continued to build momentum, keeping the potential matchup in constant discussion and making it feel bigger, more uncertain, and far more intriguing than it did before. Analysts quickly joined the conversation, moving beyond the initial headline and diving into the deeper stylistic layers of a potential clash between Jaron Ennis and Xander Zayas, carefully breaking down how each fighter's strengths and weaknesses could interact over the course of a high-level fight, examining everything from distance control and tempo management to adaptability under pressure. And what made this wave of analysis so impactful was how it shifted the narrative away from a single bold prediction by Stephen A. Smith and toward a more nuanced understanding of the matchup itself, where the focus wasn't just on who might win, but on how the fight could unfold, could disrupt that rhythm. And this broader, more detailed discussion didn't just add depth, it elevated the entire conversation, turning it into a layered breakdown that made the fight feel more complex, more unpredictable, and ultimately far more compelling for fans who began to see it not as a simple matchup, but as a strategic battle filled with variables that could shift at any moment. One of the most interesting points raised centered around the role of momentum, because in boxing that intangible factor can quietly shape outcomes in ways that statistics and rankings don't always capture, and in this case, Xander Zayas represents the hungry, rapidly evolving contender whose confidence and skill set are still climbing with every fight, while Jaron Ennis stands as the more established force, already proven at a high level and carrying the expectations that come with being viewed as a future face of the division, and that contrast creates a fascinating and slightly dangerous dynamic, because when a rising fighter enters the ring with nothing to lose and everything to gain, fueled by growth, belief, and momentum, it can sometimes disrupt the rhythm of a more established opponent who is expected to win, forcing them into a different kind of pressure. And what makes this even more compelling is how momentum isn't just about recent wins. It's about timing, confidence, and evolution aligning at the right moment, which can lead to unexpected outcomes when a challenger like Zayas meets a proven contender like Ennis, turning the fight into more than just a test of skill, but a collision between trajectory and status where the result isn't always as predictable as it may seem on paper. Another crucial factor is the mental side of the fight, because carrying the expectation of dominance can quietly become a different kind of pressure, and for Jaron Ennis, stepping into the ring as the assumed favorite means not only performing, but living up to a narrative that the boxing world has already built around him, and that weight can sometimes influence decision-making in subtle but important ways, especially if the fight doesn't unfold as expected early on, while on the other side, Xander Zayas could enter with a different mindset, focused, composed, and disciplined. Knowing that his path to success lies in sticking to a structured game plan rather than chasing moments, and if he's able to maintain that composure under pressure, control distance, and avoid getting drawn into exchanges on Ennis terms, he could begin to disrupt rhythm, slow momentum, and force the fight into a more tactical space, and that's where things become interesting, because once a fighter like Ennis is taken out of his natural flow and asked to adjust repeatedly, the mental battle starts to unfold in real time, turning what might have been a showcase of dominance into a more complex and unpredictable contest where patience, focus, and execution under pressure become just as important as speed, power, and athletic ability. The timing of this prediction is a huge part of why it hit so hard, because it arrives at a moment when both Jaron Ennis and Xander Zayas are gaining serious traction, building momentum, and drawing increasing attention from fans and analysts alike, which makes the idea of them colliding feel more real and more urgent than ever before. And when Stephen A. Smith steps in with a bold prediction at this exact stage, it doesn't just add to the conversation. It amplifies it, because the stakes are already rising, expectations are already forming, and the narrative is already taking shape, so introducing the possibility of an upset at this point creates a ripple effect that intensifies interest, fuels debate, and makes the matchup feel even bigger. And what makes it even more compelling is how perfectly it aligns with the current momentum of both fighters, turning the discussion from a distant hypothetical into something that feels immediate, relevant, and charged with anticipation, as fans begin to see not just a potential fight, but a moment that could define trajectories, alter perceptions, and leave a lasting impact on the division. As the conversation continues to evolve, one thing has become impossible to ignore: Stephen A. Smith's comments have fundamentally shifted the narrative, transforming what many once viewed as a relatively predictable matchup into a heated topic of debate and speculation, because by openly questioning the dominance of Jaron Ennis and highlighting the potential evolution of Xander Zayas, he forced fans and analysts alike to reconsider assumptions that had previously gone unchallenged, and that shift didn't just create discussion. It perceived in making it feel far more complex, competitive, and genuinely unpredictable than it ever did at the start. Whether or not the prediction from Stephen A. Smith ultimately proves accurate, it has already accomplished something just as significant. It has dramatically increased interest in a potential clash between Jaron Ennis and Xander Zayas while pushing fans to move beyond surface-level assumptions and take a deeper, more analytical look at what the fight could actually be, because instead of simply labeling Ennis as the clear favorite and leaving it at that, the conversation has evolved into a more layered discussion about styles, preparation, momentum, and mental dynamics, forcing people to consider how small adjustments, strategic discipline, and evolving skill sets, especially with influences like Canelo Alvarez in Zayas' camp, could impact the outcome in ways that aren't immediately obvious. And that shift in perspective is what makes the moment so valuable, because it transforms casual interest into genuine intrigue, encouraging fans to engage more deeply with the sport, question established narratives, and recognize that in boxing, outcomes are rarely as simple as they first appear, ultimately making the potential matchup feel richer, more complex, and far more compelling than before.